We are joined right now by our Senior Counsel of Global Affairs, former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. And Mike, I've been laying out a question to a couple of our guests, and you're the one that sat in the room with this guy, with Vladimir Putin. He's 13 days into this war. He hasn't taken Kyiv yet. He's trying, getting closer. He's not done. His troops have not performed well, and I'm trying to figure out: do you sense there is any off ramp for him to stop this aggression? Whether it's Zelensky, who mentions yesterday that they'll consider not requesting ascension into NATO. Is there an off ramp for Vladimir Putin that he's willing to take? Do you think? You've been in that room with him.
The longer this goes on, the less effective his military proves to be. The more he feels like he was lied to by his team, who told him, "Hey, boss, we can knock this out in a week." He will come to see too that the West has united. Good for everyone who stepped up, and mostly the Ukrainian people actually defending their own nation ways like he almost certainly didn't anticipate. I'm sure he's going to be looking for an out, but he knows this too, Jay. He knows at this point there's no back for Vladimir Putin. He has so much blood on his hands. What he's done, the atrocities that have been committed under his orders are at such a level, they're so egregious. You cannot imagine him being back in the G7, back in the G20, invited anywhere. He will be a pariah, and for that reason, my sense is he's going to demand an awful lot before he calls off the dogs of war.
So what does an awful lot look like? Does it look like a new government in Ukraine?
It looks like what his true objective was, which was to gain political control in Ukraine, whether that's with the current leadership, but with his guys really pulling all the strings, or a completely new leadership, probably immaterial to him. In the end, what he has wanted for a long time is the capacity to say, "I've restored the greater Russian Empire. I am now controlling this huge piece of real estate, which is Ukraine." This is not a small country. And I think that's his ultimate objective. He's going to stay at that until one of two things happens. One, he either achieves it, or second, he no longer has a combat force capable of actually delivering the ultimate solution. So he is either going to achieve this, or there's a lot of Russian soldiers going to die trying.
As you know, I do a lot of international law. I've appeared before the International Criminal Court in The Hague 3 different times, which is unusual for an American lawyer, representing U.S. interests, representing Israeli interests in various cases. But I'm thinking now that the war crimes that they're trying to put forward, it sounds like, are there war crimes? Sure. Is there an adjudicating body here? Probably not. That's the reality. So then you look at this move with the aircraft. Poland says, we'll send over the MiGs. Well, then they say, well, we'll send over the MiGs, but not directly to Ukraine. We want to send them to Ramstein Air Force Base, which is a U.S. Air Force NATO base controlled by the United States. And then the United States, you can retrofit them, get them ready, and you can have the Ukrainian pilots come over and take them out of Ramstein. Dangerous or not for the United States to do that?
Oh, I think there's a way forward here. The shame of it is, Jay, and we talked about this maybe 2 weeks ago now, as this thing was just beginning to become clear. So much work should have been done so many months ago. So all of these things could have been done in a quiet way, in a soft way, where there was less risk. Now it's highlighted, it's on the news everywhere. It's going to be very clear. You're going to watch, U.S. Air Force officers wave the airplane off the deck at Ramstein. It has created an enormous amount of risk at a time that Vladimir Putin feels incredibly threatened. There has to be a way to get this hardware to the Ukrainians. It'll be more complicated. It's not as easy as it sounds. They've got to learn to fly the particular variant there. So there's probably more to it. You got to make sure you can do spare parts and fuel, all the things that go into actually delivering. They got to make sure they can talk to each other. So it's not just a piece of hardware and jump in. But this is something that's deeply within the agency and capacity of the United States of America. We ought to be doing it, whether it's through our intelligence services, doing it clandestinely, or something more open like the Poles have been talking about.
Yesterday, President Biden announced that he was going to ban oil and gas imports from Russia, but he said that our European partners cannot do the same, so they failed to secure a coalition. What does that actually do does this do anything to Putin? Was this the right move?
I must say, this is just maddening, Jay.
Yeah.
We warned them years ago that this would be the situation, that being dependent on this energy would put them at this exact risk that we're now living through. So, I guess it's not the right time to say I told you so, but it does send lessons to the United States as we move forward about our dependency on others for energy as well. We should all think through that very carefully. So it's not about saying, boy, we warned you in that sense, other than to remind folks this is serious business. There's a deep national security implication, indeed, to the in addition to the economic ramifications of not having American energy. Look, banning Russian oil is the right thing to do as a moral matter. We saw this in the Trump administration. If you're not prepared to put secondary sanctions on, that is to make sure that no one else can buy the oil either, it doesn't have a significant impact. So the Russians will find other markets unless the United States says, nope, can't go there. Last thing to say on this is that we did that, and there's a piece in the Wall Street Journal, I think today, by Frank Fannin, who was my assistant secretary for energy, and he talks about how we managed this. We took 3 million barrels a day off the market between Venezuela and Iran, and oil prices fell. How do we do that? How do we pull all that oil off the market and oil prices still fell? We did it because we had American drilling at home. We had our friends and allies in Saudi Arabia and other places that produce crude oil said, you've got to go help the South Koreans, the Japanese who need access to your product. And we did that diplomatically. We had a full-on campaign to make sure not only the United States, but the whole world had the energy that it needed. These folks just shot themselves in the foot. They destroyed their relationships in the Middle East. Now they can't even get a phone call returned. This does not bode well. This is diplomatic malpractice, to say the least.
You're right.
And the American people are going to pay the price for that economically, heating their homes and driving their cars.
If Saudis would not return the call, would not take the call from the President of the United States, it's pretty amazing. So you were just in Taiwan. You called on the United States to recognize Taiwan as a free sovereign country. First of all, how are the Taiwanese reacting to what's going on with Putin and Russia and in Ukraine?
Well, they're heartened by the fact that the Ukrainian people have been so successful against essentially a communist-built military machine. It gives them some idea that maybe the Chinese Communist Party's military isn't quite as capable as it's all been built up to be. But more than that, they do see that the United States was late to the game, and they're worried that in defending them and providing the support that they need to defend themselves, that the United States might be late to the game as well. It's one of the reasons I wanted to go, was to remind them that the United States could be a great security partner for them. One of the things that I believe we now need to do in light of this is being in the mushy middle is a wreck. You can see that with Ukraine. Yes. And so we ought to do the common sense thing. Everyone acknowledges there's not an American political leader or anyone with any common sense who says that Taiwan is actually part of the Chinese Communist Party's mainland. We ought to just simply take the simple step of saying, hey, we're going to recognize them as an independent and sovereign nation. And then provide the Taiwanese the intelligence capabilities they need, the military capabilities they need, so that they can prepare for a solid defense, so that Xi Jinping will be deterred from doing what Vladimir Putin did in Ukraine.
Finally, last question involves the Iran nuclear deal. That we find out that the Russians are basically our go-between, which is incredible to me. So we've sanctioned Russia while we're about to take off sanctions on Iran. And the Iranians are bragging, as are the Russians, that they outmaneuvered and outnegotiated the United States in this deal.
If you are the Israeli military leadership today, or frankly the military leadership in the Emirates or Saudi Arabia or any of the Arab nations that have had to confront these Shia theocrats in Iran, if you're unhappy. If you're Hezbollah or you're the Houthis in Yemen, you are thrilled. And if you're the Russians, the Iranians, and the Chinese, you are chuckling that you have rolled the Americans in Vienna. This is a deal that puts the West, all of us, at risk. It is so disheartening to see what appears to be a shorter deal, a weaker deal, with even less verification, and by 2031, a pathway which would let Iran have as much enriched material as they wanted. It's incomprehensible to me. I hope they reconsider, and I hope that. I guess my only other hope is perhaps that Khamenei will reject this deal as well.
Maybe
he might get more.
Or now the Russians saying they may want the deal scuttled. So who knows? We appreciate it, Secretary Pompeo. As always, thanks for being with us.